In this video, we're going to talk about what is woke or woke culture. And the reason I made a video about this is because it is the most influential ideology in thousands of years, actually, and I'm going to explain you why. So first of all, woke has nothing to do with awakening or any spiritual development or anything like that. It sounds like it, but it's not, okay? It's more a political ideology that is more powerful than even science. It has become more powerful than even science because it can overrule science in some cases. And also, it has become even more powerful than most countries' governments and even the government's constitutions. Also, we'll talk about how much money is involved in woke, because it's actually trillions of dollars that are involved in this whole project that is global. We'll also talk about how woke can change the laws of countries, as we already touched on, and how it affects human rights. Okay? And we'll talk about how woke ideology, it needs three things to function. It needs a crisis, it needs an acceptable solution, and then it needs your support by virtue signaling so that you can gain social acceptance. And we will also talk about why this is a really, really strong psychological mechanism that they utilize in order to, distribute the woke ideology. So people feel, basically through peer pressure, they feel that they have to become woke and act like they're woke in order to be accepted in society. Because if you look back in human evolution, we used to live in tribes where the worst thing that could happen when you lived in a tribe was if you got kicked out of the tribe because you didn't behave in the correct way. So this is deeply wired within our psyche that we want or we need to be accepted by society in order to survive. And this is what woke culture has built their whole system around. And then we'll also zoom out and we'll talk about who created woke, where was it created, and when. And we'll also talk about what crisis does it involve, because we talked about woke is built around crisis. And then we will talk about the more serious stuff, which is hypocrisy. We will talk about all the good things that woke culture say that we should do, and then we'll talk about why it's actually not even good and why it's doing bad things for exactly the same area where it's supposed to improve. And we'll talk about who is benefiting from this. And that's going to be towards the conclusion of the video, where I'll reach a conclusion, and you can reach your own conclusions, of course. And then I'll talk about why woke has most likely been created and by who. Because you can always ask the question, who benefits from this? And by asking that question, usually by using logic, you can get guided in the most likely direction of where to find who created it. Because usually who creates something and maintains something is usually the same people that benefit from something, right? Okay, so let's zoom in on what crisis woke is using to distribute itself and to promote itself. One of the most prominent crises that woke has focused on, it's not even a crisis in my opinion, the gender equality crisis. So if you follow this topic, you know that according to woke culture and a lot of governments nowadays, you're not allowed to define what a man and a woman is because of the gender fluidity. And also you have to accept that there are, I don't know if it's 20 or 30 or 40 different genders or gender identities, I think it's called, that you have to accept that they exist, because otherwise you are not acknowledging their equality. Okay? So that's gender equality. Okay, I think the original idea of gender equality is really good. Why not, right? It makes society better. So that's one crisis that they are trying to benefit from. And when I say benefit, there's a huge amount of money involved. We can just quickly touch on that. Each person that they can convert into a sex change operation will be a lifelong customer and will, on average, generate about $1 million in revenue to the healthcare system that is supposed to guide them through all these procedures. Okay, so there's a lot of money involved and also a lot of political power involved, which we'll probably touch on later again. As you probably know, there's a lot of talk about the climate crisis, or they've even changed the name to climate emergency. And there's a lot of money involved in that too, from all the carbon taxes and also something called ESG scores. That's a rating that each big corporation can be assigned. And there's also a lot of hypocrisy in that. We'll talk about that later. Now, here's a little quiz you can do with your friends. So you can screenshot this picture and then you can post it on your social media. And then you can see the question is, how did the ice age occur before the industrial age? And why did the ice start melting all by itself? And the obvious answer is that climate change happens all by itself naturally. And even if we do affect the climate a little bit, it has already been changing a lot more in the past than it has in the last 200 years. And scientists already know this from the ice core samples from Greenland. And here's a graph where you can see the temperature, how it has been fluctuating over the last hundreds of millions of years. And then if you look at the red line towards where we are now at 2024, you can see that the temperature is low if comparing it to the previous hundreds of millions of years. And here you can also see there are several other studies that show exactly the same if you search on Google. The next crisis is war support. So at the time of recording this video, there are some wars going on. And according to woke culture, you're supposed to support the funding of a certain war at this time in history. Okay? You're not supposed to fund peace. You're not supposed to say, hey, we'll give these people this much money for this person and this person if they just sign a peace agreement. That has never been mentioned by woke culture or the mainstream media, of which most is woke. They didn't talk about this. So this is also hypocrisy, by the way. But war support is another area of woke culture. Then there's health product support. I call it this, you will know what I mean when I say that this was really initiated around 2020 when there was a global health crisis where suddenly, through very crafty media work, you had to support taking health products that were not even checked for a safety profile, because you cannot check the 10-year safety profile of a new product except if you wait for 10 years and test it on people for 10 years and see what happens after that. You cannot use a time machine to gain the safety profile of a new product as of now. A lot of the ideologies relevant to woke culture, they are being discussed in Davos at the World Economic Forum, and that's in Switzerland, by the way. When was woke really kicking in? Well, in 2004, the ESG scores were mentioned for the first time. And I think we can say that when ESG is starting to be incorporated into businesses globally, and especially in America with all the biggest companies, then I would say it has become a real thing. Now let's talk about who are the key people that is promoting woke. So at the WEF, or World Economic Forum, we have Klaus Schwab, and then we have one of the chairmen, George Soros. I'll put a link in the description on a video about George Soros, because he's a pretty relevant person as well. So you can check that out in the description. And then there's, in America, all the lefties and the current administration as of 2020, they are also woke and promoting all of these things. Okay, now let's talk about how much money is involved in woke. So through the ESG score system, that is basically like the woke score of a company, there's trillions of dollars at stake. And if a company gets a low ESG score, it will have a more difficult time on the stock market. So it's quite important for companies that are ambitious and want to grow to have a good ESG score and basically follow woke culture or face difficulties. Okay, so I'll post a link in the description that goes through how much money is involved and how, and the video is by Patrick Bet-David. Really interesting and really smart guy. And by the way, a little bit about my background. I'm a former student of nanoscience and entrepreneur. I've been doing business in 4 different countries. So I have both a scientific approach, but also I see the cash flow. And on an international scale, I'm pretty used to zooming out and seeing the big perspective. But also with nanoscience, where we're working with the smallest parts and particles in the universe, I'm also able to zoom in and see exactly what's going on in the details, which is kind of what we're trying to do in this video, both zooming out and zooming in and understanding each part. Because there's a lot of moving parts in this. It's basically a new culture that is affecting cash flow and that is changing the direction of history by using psychology in its favor. And you could also say human weakness in the human psychology. And then it's basically changing the whole political landscape of the world. And we will, again, at the conclusion, we'll talk about why and who probably initiated this. Okay, so let's return to how woke works. So now I ask you, try to think back in the last couple of years, if you've been in a crisis, like a global crisis, where you felt like you had to accept a solution that might include a lot of cash flow for certain industries and include a changing of the laws or the legal framework of your country. And then ask yourself if you have felt pressured to offer your support, and also if you have been presented with an opportunity to do virtue signaling, such as if you have been encouraged to change your profile picture or add a little logo on your profile picture. Hey, I have been supporting this product, or or this cause or this war in your profile picture on social media in order to improve your social acceptance status. If you can recognize this pattern in the last few years, and if you have been victim to this, it is a natural thing to do. Like, I'm not blaming you. I'm not blaming anybody who has fallen victim for this system, because it utilizes the strongest psychology. It is the deepest wiring. It's based on family. It's based on love and acceptance in our community, and it's based on survival. So it's very deeply wired mechanisms that they are using in order to promote their woke agenda that will change the landscape of economy, politics, laws, what it means to have human rights, or which human rights will be left, and, well, what it even means to be human or have a gender and all that stuff. All that is going to change, and I'm gonna now go towards the conclusion, where I will say that all this is making perfect sense. Like, if you look at the arrival of AI and robotics, right? Because when AI and robotics arrive to replace, or at least help replace the workforce, then the people that are, well, the industrial elites that usually employ the workforce, they want to retain their influence in the world, right? They want to retain their power, I would assume, so they can keep being the elite. That's just what I think. And it's something that's also deeply wired in human psychology. I can recognize these tendencies from myself doing business. In some cases, I have been close to gaining monopoly in my region where I have a business. And, you know, to be honest, it kind of, a part of me kind of feels good if I can see, oh, now I'm the only business that offers this service in my region, because the others, they had to shut down because they couldn't keep up or something like that. There is a sense of competitiveness in all humans, I think, in order to survive and to compete for resources. It is, I mean, I think the industrial elite that have created this woke culture, that are already multi-billionaires, I think they're extremely desperate and to a level that's unfair, just based on how far they take it. So now I'll go into detail of the hypocrisy before we get to the conclusion. Okay, so let's talk about the hypocrisy. So in the gender equality and fluidity movement or ideology, they talk about in the universities, where you're supposed to distribute knowledge on a scientific level, right? On the universities that are woke in America, they say that it's not possible to provide a definition to what is a boy or what is a woman, okay? So according to the woke universities, you're not supposed to be able to provide a definition of what is a woman and what is a man. And even children can come up with this, but they say on the scientific terms, it's fluid. You can decide whatever you are. But we all know, like you out there, the viewer, even your kids, they'll be able to say, well, women, they can give birth to children, get pregnant, and men cannot, for example. There's also more details you can go into, right? So that's a pretty good place to start, isn't it? So the hypocrisy is that even on the education institutions, they are saying that it's scientific, but it's as far away as science as you can get. It's just almost pure nonsense, okay? And then it's supposed to be about justice, about an equality thing. That's something related to justice, right? But then again, in UK, now you can actually go to jail if you even say something about that you think you can provide a definition for what a man or a woman is, like an exact definition. And then you can go to jail in UK because it's against, they've approved a new law, which is what I talk about, is this woke is starting to become more powerful than the laws of governments in some places. And it's getting more and more prominent. It's going step by step, a little bit here, a little bit there. But it's pretty frightening that such injustice of going to jail for simply being able to state the obvious truth of the simplest definition of a man or a woman. If you say it online, you can go to jail in UK. Who knows, maybe I have to delete this video in the future. Hopefully not, right? And then the next point of hypocrisy is regarding war support. I already touched on it, but why is there so much talk about you have to support this and this war when you should be working towards peace? And why not find out, okay, if we have $100 billion, why don't we ask who could we give this money in order for them to accept peace? Like the leaders of the countries or their most influential friends or business relations or party members or other governmental parties, citizens. How can we distribute this money in a way that creates peace? We've never talked about that in mainstream media. It's absurd. Okay, so that's another hypocrisy. It's like you have to support war but not peace, but actually peace should be the goal because that's what we all want. And then with the global health crisis, there's also hypocrisy. They're promoting the science of this new product, but their science, according to the Twitter files, they have silenced the leading epidemiologists from Harvard, Stanford, and Oxford that came together and signed an agreement or a letter that this was completely unscientific. The way this was being managed by the governments of the world was completely unscientific and against knowledge that we have. Another area of hypocrisy is the climate crisis. They say it's the only acceptable solution to the climate crisis is, according to their data or science, to reduce CO2. So they say that they have a lot of knowledge about CO2. But now the hypocrisy is that they don't present any of the historic data or scientific historic data on CO2 levels that are fully accessible. If you do the drilling in the ice cores, both on Greenland or Antarctica, you can drill through the ice and you can extract samples from the ice cores and you can see all the data of CO2 levels, temperatures throughout millions of years, and you will see that climate change is actually ongoing and not only human-made at all. It might be a tiny bit also affected by human activity, but it has always been fluctuating. That's why we have ice ages. They don't even mention ice ages. Like, think about how big of a climate change an ice age is, and it occurs naturally. There's also Milankovitch cycles. I'm going to post a few links about climate change in the description as well. Okay, so now we've talked about the hypocrisy. Now I'm going to go through the conclusions, and you can make your own conclusions as well. And I'll talk about why I think woke has been created and how we can address it, okay? So the conclusion is that woke ideology or woke culture is more powerful than science because it can override science, as we've seen with the health crisis or the gender fluidity issue, that even the best scientist in the world has been silenced in favor of woke culture and ideology. So science is less important or less powerful than woke ideology. Okay, that's a conclusion. It's an objective conclusion that anybody will have to accept or agree upon, right? Also, I'll conclude that woke culture is more influential and more powerful than most governments and their constitutional law, because it has been proven through a lot of these crises, especially the health crisis as well, that, for example, the constitutional law of freedom of speech has been cancelled or overridden by woke culture and censorship, silencing the highest educated scientists that we have on the planet in favor of woke and their agenda and their cash flow and transfer of power and wealth, basically. Because that's what's happening with woke. Final conclusion is it's both a transfer of wealth through all this product, but it's also a transfer of citizen human rights, basic human rights and freedoms away from the citizens. So transferring your rights, your human rights, away from you as a citizen into the governments and favoring the big corporations instead. So that's where it's going. It's a transfer of wealth and rights, like human rights, away from humans and away from the people. And then it will be controlled by the people who control these corporations. Okay, so why has woke been created? By who? And why does it make sense? Well, as I touched upon earlier, I would think it all makes perfect sense if you think about the arrival of robots and AI, because the industrial elite that has been employing humanity on factories for centuries now, they no longer need the workforce when the robots arrive to help relieve humans of their work. So they're thinking about how to restructure society and how to restructure basically the global governance, both the governments of each country, but also on a global scale, in their favor. That's what it's all about, in my opinion. You can make your own conclusions, of course. So that's what it's about. So finally, I'll talk about what I think you can do to help. The first thing you can do always is to talk openly with your friends about this. Post about it on social media, like I'm doing this video now, so that people can know that they're not alone. I want you to imagine one thing, and that is that 99.9% of all people actually don't want to be woke. I believe that truly, okay? It's only because they feel pressured to do woke things that it appears as if more people want to do it. And it's powered by mainstream media. They promote it all over the place, so it's almost like gaslighting. When you look at the media and you just see woke stuff everywhere, it's called gaslighting, when they make you feel like you're insane if you don't believe the same, because they promote it everywhere, and then you will feel weird if you don't accept or support these ideologies. That's called gaslighting. So retain your common sense and speak about it with your friends. And when enough people speak about it openly, things will change, because the people in position of making a change, they will make a change when they know they have enough support. Enough about that. I was trying to do a 10-minute video or 5-minute video, but it was a bit longer. In any case, thank you for watching, subscribe, and see you on the next one.